All right, let's get underway, and other members may join as well throughout the hearings, and you may all need to forgive me sporadically throughout the hearings, as I have a baby daughter, 4-month-old, behind me who should in theory be in a window of relaxation and quiet and calm, but theory may not prove to be our friend. We shall see. So if you bear with me, that would be much appreciated. All right, I declare open this public hearing of the Joint Committee of Public Accounts and Audit for the inquiry into Commonwealth financial statements 23-24 and 24-25, and I thank the witnesses for being here today. I call representatives from the Australian Centre for International Agricultural Research, Australian Pesticides Veterinary Medicines Authority, the Australian National Audit Office, Department of Health, Disability and Ageing and Services Australia. Now, given I'm virtually chairing this meeting, we will ask everyone to introduce themselves and, for the Hansard record plate, state your name and the capacity in which you appear before the committee. But maybe if we can sort of go around the room to the, on one side, and then finish around with the Auditor General, swinging around, so everyone can have a go.
Hi, Annie Ryan, Chief Operating Officer, Australian Pesticides and Veterinary Medicines Authority.
Nick Austin, Acting Chief Executive Officer, the Australian Centre for International Agricultural Research.
Samantha Callanan, Acting General Manager Corporate for the Australian Centre for the International Agricultural Research.
Stuart Turnbull, General Manager, Families and Participation Division in Services Australia.
Robin Shannon, Deputy CEO, Program Design Group in Services Australia.
Chris Birra, Deputy CEO of the Payments and Integrity Group, Services Australia.
Angela Diamond, Chief Financial Officer, Services Australia.
Julian Wamsley, Acting National Manager, Financial Systems Policy and Reporting, Services Australia.
Lisa Craswell, Group Executive Director, Systems Assurance and Data Analytics, Australian National Audit Office.
Carolee McLeish, Auditor General.
Carla Jago, Acting Deputy Auditor General.
Sean Benfield, Senior Executive Director, Financial Statements Group.
All right, I think that's it. So why don't we start with opening statements, and then is there anyone else? Is there someone online that needs to introduce themselves? Well, David Hicks, do you mind just doing that again? Your internet seems to have been fibre copper to the node over here. So you want to have another go? Sure. Is it just me, or is it skipping?
No, it's a problem for all of us, Chair.
Cool. Jenny, I can't hear anything. You want to say that again? Was it just me, or was there?
No, it's a general problem. It's a problem for everyone.
Right. Not sure what's going on, Mr. Hicks, but I'm sure we can find a way to include you formally in the Hansard record. As this hearing is a formal proceeding of the Parliament, the giving of false and misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as a contempt of the Parliament. The evidence given today will be recorded by Hansard and tracks parliamentary privilege. I remind all that is present today that as Chair I will ensure proceedings are conducted in an orderly, respectful and courteous way. And I further remind committee members that public officials should not be asked to give opinions on matters of policy and should be given reasonable opportunity to refer questions to superior officers or to a minister. However, this does not preclude questions asking for explanations of policies, factual questions about when and how policies were adopted. Witnesses also reminded that any claim that would be contrary to the public interest to answer a question must be made by a minister and accompanied by a statement setting out the basis for the claim. Now, does anyone have any brief opening remarks before we move around for questions?
Chair, it's Carolee McLeish here.
Auditor General, did you have any opening statements you wish to contribute before we have a go?
Yeah, I provided an opening statement to the Committee for Circulation. If it suits you, I can...
My sincere apologies, Carolee. I can't hear anything that's going on in the room.
Can you hear me now if I'm closer to the microphone?
You're very faint, and
Right. I think
we'll
just
go on.
we'll just do a sound check.
Yeah, that's better. That's better.
Is it better?
Yep.
Okay, I will speak in to the microphone. I did provide an opening statement for circulation, and I can highlight a few points from that if that suits you and the committee. Great. So the ANAO prepares a report annually on the outcomes of financial statements audits conducted across the Australian government sector. In 24-25, the report covered the audits of 243 entities, including the consolidated financial statements. So it's a significant undertaking both for the ANAO and also entities across the public sector, and I want to thank entities and the ANAO team for the considerable effort in preparing the statements and the audits. The reports provide a point-in-time view of key financial statements, risks, governance arrangements and internal controls across Commonwealth entities. And they also highlight deficiencies, or what we term as audit findings, that create business risk or affect an entity's ability to produce high-quality financial statements. Across the last year, we have observed continued improvement in the maturity and the quality of entities' financial statement preparation. The number and significance of audit findings reduced relative to the previous year. We observed fewer misstatements, errors or omissions in entity financial statements, and the timeliness of financial reporting improved. Despite the overall decrease in findings, we also continue to observe persistent areas that require improvement. Weaknesses in IT controls remain the largest area of audit findings in both years. 45% of findings in 2024-25 relate to the IT control environment. That's up on 43% in the previous year. Weaknesses in IT controls can expose entities to an increased possibility of unauthorised access to systems, to data or data leakage, and they can pose significant business risks to security and to integrity of entity operations. So addressing these fundamental IT findings is essential in an environment where entities are increasingly relying on technology, including artificial intelligence, in their operations. The latest report also continued to identify legislative breaches, with findings on legislative non-compliance increasing in the last year to 21 compared with 15 in 23-24. These legislative breaches range widely in nature, for example, from breaches of Section 83 of the Constitution, where payments were made without a valid appropriation, to incorrect remuneration payments that resulted in non-compliance with determinations of the Remuneration Tribunal. We will continue to monitor these and other themes in findings through the 25-26 financial statements audit cycle, which is well underway now, and our broader audit work program, including our performance audits and performance statements audits, with a strong focus on assessing entity risk and how entities are responding to what is a very complex and challenging environment. Thank you, and we look forward to assisting the committee in its inquiry.
Thank you very much, Auditor General, and thank you for your team for all of the work. So let's dive in, and Sally, if you're online and you want to be handed over the call, please just interrupt at any moment. So maybe let's go through each of the different agencies and kind of try and do a little bit for everyone. And let's start with the Section 83 Constitution breaches. Maybe I'll start with the Auditor General first, and then I'll hand over to, and then I'll go to sort of each agency. But if you want, for the purposes of Hansard, can you describe the sort of breaches of Section 83 that you've identified, and the nature of them, and how they vary?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'll start, and I'll see if others want to contribute as well. So in the last year, 11 material entities disclosed breaches or potential breaches of Section 83 of the Constitution, which provides that money cannot be withdrawn from the Consolidated Revenue Fund except under appropriation that's made by law. That was an increase on the previous year. That increase is both a positive and a negative. Positive in the sense that more disclosure can indicate that entities are considering whether or not they are in potential breach of Section 83 as they prepare their financial statements. We have seen, and we'll likely hear more this morning, about processes that have been put in place to provide assurance over lawfulness. And these processes are identifying more potential breaches of Section 83. So there's a positive element to the growth in findings on Section 83 breaches. On the other hand, ideally entities would have controls in place when establishing and administering the programs and payments to mitigate against that risk in the first place. We do see a wide range of breaches in terms of the nature of the breaches and the value of those. Some may be related to long-standing issues of misalignment between IT systems and the law that have developed over many years. Some may be related to an inadvertent administrative error and how delegations are followed in an agency. Payments could be made in good faith. So we see some breaches that are payments that are based on incomplete or inaccurate information from recipients of those payments. And that can result in a potential breach of Section 83. Also, breaches could be a result of fraud or of bad faith. So there really is a wide range of potential breaches that are covered in our findings. I think what's important is to see whether agencies are acting on the findings, that they take lawfulness seriously and they put steps in place to remediate those findings. And we'll hear more from some of the entities shortly on the steps that are being taken. But Carla, is there anything that you would add to that?
I'd probably just add that the majority of the Section 83 breaches we see relate to legislation that entities administer. The vast majority. There is the Australian Centre for International Agricultural Research that we've got here today. Theirs was a little bit different because it's around employee entitlement payments and whether they're departmental or administered, and we can cover when we get to that what departmental and administered means. But the vast majority of the Section 83 breaches relate to legislation administered by entities.
Thank you. So maybe I'll start with health and then we'll go to international agricultural research off the basis of that that advice. So let's start with the Department of Health. So the 23-24 audit basically said that health didn't have any centralised process to assess whether whether there was, you were complying with the legislation. Do you want to talk through, for the purpose for the committee, what you did to change that?
Sure thing. Can I test whether I can actually be heard now? You're nodding. You are. So that's good to hear.
Yeah, and maybe given we had some gremlins in the system, do you want to start with your name and the capacity in which you appear before the committee, Mr. Hicks?
Sure thing. Thank you. So my name's David Hicks. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for the Department of Health, Disability and Ageing. So, yeah, the 23-24 audit was asking the question as to whether we had a centralised and consistent oversight and review process, and the department didn't. We had risk management and assessment activity go on across the programs, but not in that consistently oversighted manner. So where we run into...
Do you mind just saying that again, Mr. Hicks?
So it wasn't an absence of review and oversight entirely. Instead, it was a centralised and consistent approach to that oversight and a consistent assessment of the risk level across each of the programs. So there are a few things that we did.
What did that mean in practice? I mean, you sort of there was sort of policies, but no one was actually sort of keeping an eye on them, or what did that kind of mean?
More a case of program A might have a different risk consideration to what program B might have, because consideration was made at the program level, and then we weren't bringing that together and assessing holistically and consistently across all of those programs. So what that says is that some programs are doing it really well, but a bunch of them won't have been. And so what that meant was an inconsistent approach, I think, to how we identified potential Section 83 breaches and potential legal non-conformance in program payments.
Which agencies are doing it well? Which program did it well?
I don't know offhand. I can come back with a set of the good ones if that would help.
That would be useful. Were there any that you identified that were that needed reform?
Again, I don't remember specific programs that were positive or negative on that front, but I can run that to the ground.
Maybe the Auditor General might have any programs that are worth sort of identifying as the good examples in the Department of Health that obviously wasn't centralised, but any examples of programs managing that well?
I don't know if I can give program-specific examples, but when the issue was raised back in 23-24, it was because some non-compliance had been identified very late in the financial statement audit process, and that related to the pharmaceutical benefits scheme payments under the National Health Act. And that's what actually really brought to our attention this inconsistent approach between different program areas. And one of the things, and Mr Hicks might be able to talk a little bit more to this, or potentially Services Australia, one of the things that we understand then happened was a much more structured engagement between the Department of Health and Services Australia, and then a more structured recording of and follow-up of potential legislative compliance matters by the Department of Health once the new processes were in place.
I mean, that makes sense, but I'm just curious as to why the evidence given to the committee was that we had some programs that were doing it well.
I think the easiest way to answer that would be to come back on where the processes were different across programs. But the one that Ms Jago mentions is obviously the big driver of this. Is it worth stepping through what we did?
Please.
Resolve. So what we did do was look at our processes for assessing risk, our internal processes, and drove those processes from the centre. So one of the challenges with these programs, particularly those run where we execute the payments through a third party, is you've got finance, legals, and program area within the department, finance, legals, and a program area within Services Australia, and ensuring that they operated in sync as it related to legislative compliance was the real piece that we needed to resolve. So we did set up that centralised review and oversight process and applied that across programs. We strengthened the guidance internally on identifying Section 83 breaches and what the reporting obligations and possible remediation actions were. So you can resolve a Section 83 breach through amendments to legislation, amendments to the enabling systems or the processes around those systems as well. We did a stock take of all of our programs and assessed the legislative compliance risk across those, and we did that in a driven from the centre again, so that we took a more consistent approach to that. And we kicked in the formal governance and reporting arrangements. So we've got a formal requirement for our legal area to report to the CFO now on legislative compliance matters. There's a formalised relationship between the legal areas of Health and Services Australia. And we've also got a requirement that so we've got this strategic business committee which deals on programs administered by Services Australia on the department's behalf, and that has representatives from both the enabling areas, so corporate, legal and finance within Services Australia, as well as the department and the program areas. And we formally escalate any potential legislative non-compliance up through our financial statements subcommittee and into audit committee as well. And we've also built targeted legislative compliance questions into the assurance activity that we undertake here. So we've got an assurance census that we run through our exec at the end of March through our branch heads, at the end of financial year through our division heads, and also through deputies, where they need to answer specific legislative compliance questions on the way through.
Thank you for that. That sounds like a pretty comprehensive set of reforms. Do you mind going through the sort of the Department of Health identified a number of Section 83 breaches in the 24-25 financial statements. Can you go through the different types? So there was some identified in aged care subsidies, home care, crediting of unspent funds, supply of complex authority required drugs, exemption process for authority required prescriptions, and private health insurance rebates. Can you go through the nature of the one? Like what is it? What did that actually mean? What was the scale of these sorts of breaches, and how serious were they?
Sure. So they're all serious. There's no materiality threshold on Section 83 breaches. So we do take them all seriously. There's a fair variety there, and the list I think looks relatively long, not least of all because of the additional work that we put in through that, particularly the stock take process, to more readily identify. So we're looking at programs that a lot of them are long since established, and so if they did have a legal conformance issue in it, then we expected this exercise to bring them up. So we've got a couple of programs. So, for example, in relation to aged care subsidies and fees, we had overpayments of $368 million, and that was really in relation to there's a quarterly arrears review process that was inconsistent with the legislation. So I think the legislation required I think it was near enough to real time reconciliation. I can't remember whether it was next day or weekly, but whatever it wasn't quarterly like was being the process was being delivered. And so essentially what we do is make payments, and then there'd be this reconciliation process on a quarterly basis, and that would true up any payments in either direction. So the net result was right for the provider, but running that process quarterly was inconsistent with the legislation. So we had a process issue there. And so
so that was $368 million that you identified that was not done in accordance with the legislative. Within the legislation. Can you explain to me, and forgive me, Mr. Hicks, can you explain to me the sort of what's set out in the legislation and why the quarterly payments doesn't marry up to that?
So I'm just conscious that Sally's got a hand up here as well. I don't know if that's to weigh in on this or.
I'm not in the room, and I can only see people's.
Sorry, I can wait until after you've responded to this, but I did have a follow-up question. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, sorry. I do need to apologise because I couldn't hear anybody during the introduction, so I'm not quite.
No worries. No, you're all good. You're all good. Carry on. Push on.
So I think, and this was a process that had been in place for a number of years, and so I think. This is so where where the design and build process, where requirements are defined by the department, they're implemented by the payment agency, where that process doesn't strongly align to this cross-checking to whether it aligns to the legislation, and a pretty innocuous and practical sounding process approach, which is look, a quarterly review and then truing up at the end of that quarter makes a lot of practical sense. Well, that the checking process in order to ensure that that piece aligned to the legislation appears not to have occurred.
So what's the difference between the $368 million of payments that were not compliant and the rest of the payments that were compliant? So, and then Sal, please, I'll hand over to Sal after that. Yeah.
Sure. So these are payments that were still due to those providers, but they were payments that would have been encompassed in this quarterly reconciliation instead of the actual timeline that those reconciliations should have been done. So the net result was still the right amount landed with the providers, but a certain amount was captured in this true-up that should have been done on a different time scale. So the right result for the recipient, because it doesn't align to the timeframes of reconciliation that were in the legislation, meant that we have still breached Section 83 anytime we.
Right. So it's just basically that we didn't pay the invoice on time.
Well, I guess this relates to overpayments, so it's more paying ahead of time. So
can you just? Yeah. Sal, forgive me. I'll just. So do you want to just expand on that?
So I'm trying to work out describe the under or the ons and offs that go into a reconciliation process and how they would have run through this. Can I just think about how I could neatly describe that and come back to you? Would that be okay?
As someone who often doesn't describe things that neatly, you don't need to wrap it up in a bow. It's more just sort of the. This isn't about. You do this quarterly reconciliation. You realise there's $368 million that doesn't line up, doesn't comply with the legislation. My question was, well, does it just mean that you didn't pay in time? You said no, it's overpayment. What do you mean by that?
So
we're paying people stuff that they didn't they didn't invoice us for, or they invoiced but it doesn't line up to the services, or we paid too fast. What's
no? It's neither of those. These are still services that were performed, and they're still in line with what was invoiced. It's just the reconciliation that brought them into line. So it may be that they were overpaid this quarter and then it was trued up in the following quarter, aligned to services that were subsequently invoiced. And then in that following quarter, perhaps they were short, and so there was another true up occurred. And so
we sort of paid for services that were inevitably going to be invoiced next year in this financial year, kind of thing.
Well, not even in different financial years. It's just at any point that's before or after that reconciliation occurs.
And why? I mean, $368 million seems like quite a large amount. Is it sort of, was it spread out across a number of different providers, or how did you?
A number of providers and over a number of periods, and each time that a reconciliation shows that there's an overpayment this cycle, even if it's resolved in the subsequent cycle or resolved as part of that true-up process, that still shows as an overpayment, and it doesn't net off against any underpayments as a result of that reconciliation as well. So it's a gross number that's spread over a number of providers over a number of years.
So how does that even, I don't understand how it works though. Why isn't there a set invoicing or a set payment system for a provider? You're doing X amount of services, so therefore you send us the whatever it is, the invoice or the service fee, and then in accordance with departmental policy, the invoice will be funded within a certain period of time.
So I think
move on.
these relate to subsidies that are paid in advance of services being provided. So the reconciliation matches what's been paid to what's subsequently been incurred, and so it's the
Why were they paid in advance?
That's the nature of the program.
Which program?
Aged care subsidies. It is called. If you can just give me a moment, I'll dig out the specific name of the program. Might take a moment as I dig through, so I can come back to you if that's helpful.
Sal, do you want to? I'll hand over to Sal and go for it.
Right, thank you. Mr. Hicks, I'm not sure if this is a question for you or the ANAO or the Auditor General, but was this breach something that was identified by Services Australia, or was this something that was picked up by the Auditor General's team?
It's Carla Jago here. The Department of Health identified this issue, and just if it helps on that previous line of questioning, the way I describe it, Chair, is that it is it's an actual overpayment at the time that the payment was made, usually due to a change in circumstances. If there are future payments, then those future payments can be offset against that amount owing. If there weren't future payments, then that amount would need to be recovered. So it is a true overpayment at the time that that payment is made, if that helps.
Sal, I'll come back to Ms. Jago's evidence just then, but do you want to keep going?
Yeah, I am curious. So these programs have been running for some time. You said, Mr. Hicks, this had been going on. So presumably the breaches there had been in place for some time, or had there been a new process that had been brought in, therefore that's when the breaches started to occur?
Mr. Hicks, do you want to take it?
I don't have at hand when this breach kicked in.
My understanding is...
So whether there was a change. Sorry, it looks like...
Sorry, I was just going to say, my understanding is it was first identified in the year 22-23 by, and I'm not sure if it was Department of Health or Services Australia. It was one of those two agencies identified it then, but I believe it had been occurring for quite some time before that.
Right, so it was identified within the department in 22-23, but wasn't, and then again in 24-25, or had it been rectified by that stage?
No, it was identified in 22-23. That was initially, but it takes a period to review the nature of the breach and formalise that, and so we reported it in 23-24.
And how was it picked up? I guess, so broadly, my line of questioning is these processes are in train, and they are, I'm just interested in how a process that has been going for a number of years and seemingly had been in breach for a number of years, where is there a review mechanism about processes that have been running for a long time to pick up these breaches?
So that's what we've implemented is that review mechanism across our programs. So we're conscious that and this goes to the nature of the initial finding is that the method for detection was insufficient and inconsistent across our programs, and so that what we're talking about now is the implementation of oversight, stronger guidance, governance between the two agencies to hit this on three fronts. Firstly, when designing and implementing new programs. Secondly, when incorporating changes to programs, whether they're legislative or whether they're system driven or a process change, but also to review existing programs.
Right, and just one final follow-up. In terms of reviewing existing programs, is that done at a set time, or would you do that every 4 years? When would that review occur?
So we've taken the initial stock take, which was a deep dive review, and then we use the ongoing assurance program and governance to remain across where changes might have occurred that impact existing programs, but also assessing and building into the implementation process on new programs. So it's ongoing.
Okay. And sorry, Chair, I know I said that was the last follow-up, but one final follow-up. If there are legislative changes, how do you, given the complexity of the area that you look after, how do you ensure that there aren't any legislative changes and then reviewing how that might impact across many of the areas that you're looking after? How do you do that piece of work?
So we in the design and build process, we've built in legislative compliance checking requirements, and then also we use the governance that we've built with Services Australia to assess programs as they go on, whether they're ongoing or whether they're in the state of change or build.
Over to you, Chair.
Thanks, Al. Ailey, or if anyone else wants to jump in, feel free to. I've just got a couple more questions on this, and then we'll try and get on to another department. So apologies for all of the love directed towards the Department of Health. Just on the back of Ms. Jago's statement around overpayments, were there any payments that were made that needed to be recovered as part of that $368 million, Mr. Hicks?
So as I understand, there were, and they were.
Okay, and they were repaid.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. And what was the nature of those sort of overpayments?
So they'd be payments where somebody exited the program.
Right. And they just kind of hadn't notified the department, or how did that work?
Well, it happened during that period between payment and reconciliation. And so the reconciliation process is what, or that quarterly review is what captures those.
Yeah, I understand what captured the overpayment, but what happened to lead to the overpayment? Why was the payment made in the first place? Was it just a scheduled ongoing service provider that, if things tick along and there's automatic payments, or was there a decision made to pay a service that then ceased being a service?
So my understanding is that the entitlement for an upcoming period is based on the previous period. And so where circumstances changed during that upcoming period after that entitlement had been paid, that's where the reconciliation kicks in and assesses the match between what was paid and whether it aligned to the entitlement.
Ms. Jago, is there anything else you want to add to that?
I don't think so, Chair.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you. I think maybe let's move to. Thank you, Mr. Hicks. Sorry for all of the focus. In the last 10 or so minutes, we might try and move to another agency. So the Department of International Agricultural Research, during the 24-25 financial statements audit, the Auditor General found a significant legislative breach was identified relating to the management of employment costs associated with reclassifications between departmental and administered appropriations. Do you mind going through what the Auditor General have found? Oh. The room seems to be on mute for me. Sorry.
It's better if I... Oh, now I...
Yeah, that's better. Yep, gotcha. Sometimes it takes a moment for the microphones to catch on.
Samantha Callanan, Acting General Manager Corporate for the Australian Centre for International Agricultural Research. So this situation occurred in about September 2024. There was an internal restructure in ACIAR. As part of this restructure, there were 4 positions which were reviewed in terms of their role classification. So we either classify roles as belonging to departmental appropriation or administered appropriation. In this particular instance, they moved from being classified, the nature of the role changed to such an extent that they needed to be reclassified to administered. As part of that process, what then should have happened is that we pay those particular elements out of the departmental, and the administered appropriation funds the salary components for those positions going forward. It's what we call an on-charging expense. In this particular circumstance, what had happened is the individuals who are involved had just transferred the whole of those roles directly from departmental and into administered, but some of those components that had been moved into the administered appropriation to come out of that funding source should have stayed in departmental and been managed through that departmental process and on-charging arrangement.
Can you explain what the difference between the departmental and administrative positions are?
Yeah, so we follow the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade's direct delivery of aid tests to assess positions. So administered positions are positions where over 50% of their efforts involved in the direct delivery of development work and administered related funding sources. So dealing to a much larger extent in their engagement with partner donors, the development and implementation of programs, so that most of their work is coming directly out of and supporting that administered expenditure, which is a significant bulk of our broader expenditure for ACIAR.
And so, seems like a pretty clear definition. What were the 4 positions that were moved from departmental to administered?
I don't have them quite clear. This was identified, including some of the processes around some of the decisions. So these decisions remained in departmental at the end of the financial year, but it was our Director of Capacity Development. So they look at the scholarship program and the implementation of the scholarship program of overseas students coming back to Australia. And there was a position within that team that directly managed those particular elements. And some work with our multilateral and strategic partnership positions as well.
So the 4 positions were in the scholarship program?
2 of them were in the scholarship program, yep. And the other 2 were in... Yep.
2 were in the scholarship program?
Yep.
And 2 were where?
In our multilateral and strategic partnership program.
And what was the nature of those 2?
Working with some of our international partners and donors in terms of a delivery of funding to those partners for agricultural research.
Which partners?
It's a range of partners often linked to the World Bank. So CABI is one of the partners. I don't have a list of all of the partners they work with.
So, so 2 people working in the scholarship program, and what was their jobs?
It was the director of the capability development team, and the other one was, I think it is, the senior program officer for within that team, in the capacity development team.
The capacity development team.
Yep.
So essentially, they were like what? And what was their jobs?
So their jobs are to largely manage a lot of our learning and capacity development programs run with developing countries overseas. So it'll be things, they primarily manage the John Albright Fellowship Program, which is whereby scholars from apply from overseas to come to do agricultural research study here in Australia.
Right. So, why were they put in administered positions, not departmental positions?
When we do the assessment, when the assessment was done of the positions, it was assessed at that particular point that over 50% of their time was in the direct delivery of that particular development program. So just in accordance with the requirements for the direct delivery of aid test, that it could be moved from that, and I believe that was part of the restructure.
And Chair, if I might come in on that, the issue was, in terms of the breach, was not the movement, it was the fact that their entitlements weren't similarly adjusted to the administered rather than departmental.
Do you want to just expand on that? What wasn't adjusted?
So when the restructure occurred, the decision was made to assess those roles as being primarily focused on the delivery of aid, so therefore appropriately funded, their salaries funded through the administered line. They had been working with ACIAR prior to that and had accrued entitlements, and they weren't appropriately adjusted to the administered. They were in departmental.
So all of the departmental entitlements that they accrued weren't transferred over to the administered appropriations. Is that what you're saying?
Can I just, sorry, to correct, it's a somewhat confusing process. In this instance, they were all transferred over, but some of those provisions had previously been funded out of departmental and should stay in departmental. And so because they'd been fully uplifted as a whole costing and put in administered, that's where the Section 83 breach arose from. And so we had to we then took the decision to transfer them back once the issue was identified.
Right. So basically, they worked for the departmental roles. They transferred into, or they were designated to basically be service delivery, and therefore under the guidelines should be in the administered appropriations. Their entitlements were transferred from departmental appropriations to administered appropriations. However, given the nature of those entitlements, they should have remained in the departmental appropriations.
And just the salary components covered through administered. Correct.
Right. Were there any changes in salary or entitlements as part of that process?
No.
Exactly the same.
Yeah.
All right. Has it happened again?
No.
Okay. I think I'm nervous of time, and I'm kind of so many questions and not enough time to do them. I guess maybe for the Department of Health, if I can come back to you on a different topic, how's the department, or what program specifically is the department using AI to make decisions around service delivery?
So we'll be discussing AI at 11:30, and we'll have our digital team along for that, but the opening statement on that is that we don't use AI for decision making.
Okay, great. We'll come back to that in 11:30. I got ahead of myself.
Can I give a clarifying one while I've got the?
While you've got the conch? Yeah, go for it.
Thank you. I did describe the aged care subsidies as being paid in advance. They're paid monthly in arrears, but based on the prior quarter's review amount. So it's those monthly payments that are then assessed at the end of the quarter as to whether they align to the entitlement. So I just wanted to clear that up. I did describe them as paid in advance incorrectly. Sorry.
Right. Maybe last question to, thank you, Mr. Hicks. The Australian Pesticides and Veterinary Medicines Authority, in the 24-25 audit relating to the non-collection of levies on disposals of unregistered products held under permit, can you just expand on what that finding was and what it related to?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Annie Ryan,
Broadcasting needs to switch your mic on.
Guys.
Can you hear me?
Yep, got you now.
Great. Chief Operating Officer, Australian Pesticides and Veterinary Medicines Authority. So I'll start by explaining, because I think it'll help me explain the issue, how we are funded. So we're primarily funded through cost recovery for our costs to regulate the vet medicines and agricultural chemical industries, and we do that by charging fees and levies, plus a small amount of appropriation. So applicants who wish to register veterinary medicines or ag chemicals pay fees to apply for those registrations, and they then pay levies on an annual basis based on the disposals of those registered products based on the wholesale value of their sales. We also allow the sale and use of unregistered products, so these are ones that aren't on our register, where there is a permit in place for their use. And they can arise for issues such as emergency use of chemicals or for minor or research purposes. And according to our Collection of Levy Act, we had not been collecting levies from those permit holders when they were disposing or when those products were sold, but we were required to under that legislation. So we had...
What products were they?
But I missed that, sorry.
What products were they?
They were products held under permit for either emergency or minor use, and they would have been unregistered products. There were a range of products that are held under permit.
Which ones were they?
I don't know exactly which ones. I can take those on notice. I don't have a list of the ones that we weren't paying.
Were any of them sort of? I mean, you mentioned the fact that some of them were used for research, or some of them are used for emergency uses. I mean, clearly you've got some idea of what they are. What sort of products are they?
I've got a couple of examples. One we use is a product called Cydectin, which is used by the Wombat Protection Society of Australia. That is a pour on cattle treatment for the management of mange, but it was used under permit for a different purpose than it was registered. So it was used by that Wombat Protection Society of Australia to treat mange in wombats. So that was a use that was not in accordance with the registration, but was approved for use under permit in that situation.
And what about some of the research bases? What other products?
I don't have an example of one of those. I'm going to have to take that on notice, but often universities will take out permits over products that may never have been registered, and they want to undertake some research testing of those products. And they will often dispose of them after, throw them away, in other words, after using those in tests. According to our legislation, even if they're throwing them away as a form of disposal, we should be collecting levies on those.
So you're meant to be collecting levies. You estimated how much the levies should have been paid? What the total value of levies that should have been paid?
We now do collect levies. So we've put a process in place to identify and then collect those levies. For the 24-25 financial year, the amount was 102,000, so quite a small amount when compared to the full extent of levies that we collect on registered products, so it's less than 1%. So that's sort of an annual estimate, well, the actual amount in 24-25, and we can sort of estimate, I suppose, what they could have been in previous years based on that estimate.
Okay. Given we're running out of time and we're about to go, we've got more witnesses to get through. Maybe for the purposes of the committee, can you please provide the list of products that were under permit where levies should have been paid but were not, to the committee, and if possible, what the rough estimated levies would have amounted to for those products, if possible.
Yes, yep, we can do that. Thank you.
Thank you. And I guess, sorry, very quickly, what was the reason as to why levies weren't being paid? Or was it we just weren't being asked for, or what was the?
Yeah, I think it was before my time, but I understand that there was some difficulty for those permit holders in identifying the disposals of those products. Quite often there is no relationship between the permit holder, for example, a state government or a industry representative organisation who might take out an emergency permit for use in an emergency situation, and there's no relationship between them and the manufacturer of those products, so it was very difficult for the data to be found about those disposals. So I can only sort of assume that because of that difficulty, we weren't seeking the information from the permit holders in order to charge them those levies.
Okay. Thank you. Well, thank you all for giving evidence today. Taking any questions or notice been asked to provide additional information, can you please forward your responses to the Secretariat by Wednesday, 13 May 2026? And if the committee has further questions, they'll be sent to you in writing through the Secretariat. Thank you, team. Appreciate it. We'll see the Department of Health and anyone else coming back a little bit later. We are just going to pause for, we'll come back at 10:35 for 4 minutes and come back with the next witness. So, all right, we're going to resume broadcasting. Good to go. Thumbs up. All right, I now call representatives from the ANAO, Department of Defence, Department of Finance and the NBN. For the Hansard record, could you please each state your name and the capacity in which you appear before the committee? And we'll start from those in the room and then go to those online.
Amy Fox, Governance and Resource Management, First Assistant Secretary, Department of Finance.
Lasantha Samaranayaka, Assistant Secretary for Accounting and Frameworks Branch, Department of Finance.
Lisa Craswell, Group Executive Director, Systems Assurance and Data Analytics at the Australian National Audit Office.
Carolee McLeish, Auditor General.
Carla Jago, Acting Deputy Auditor General.
Sean Benfield, Senior Executive Director, Financial Statements Audit.
And then I believe we've got a couple of people online.
Good morning, Chair. John Ardelgen, Director Support Operations within Defence.
ASIAR Emily Hilda, First Assistant Secretary, Digital Capability Defence.
Welcome. I think that's it. I know one more.
I'm Chair Robert Sewell, I'm the Chief Information Officer at NBN. And Simon Atkinson, I'm the Chief Financial Officer at NBN.
All right, welcome all. This hearing is a formal proceeding of the Parliament. The giving of false and misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as a contempt of the Parliament. The evidence given today will be recorded by Hansard and attracts parliamentary privilege. I remind all present that as Chair, I will ensure that proceedings are conducted in an orderly, respectful and courteous way. Witnesses are reminded that any claim that would be contrary to the public interest to answer a question must be made by a minister and accompanied by a statement to setting out the basis for the claim. Does anyone have any opening remarks before we move to questions from the committee? All right, let's go back to my notes. IT security has obviously been a key focus of the ANAO's work, and I'm just going to maybe start with the Department of Defence. Why did the Defence Department submit no Category A or B audit findings during the ANAO's audit of Defence's financial statement?
Okay, thank you, Chair. I might start and then I might ask my co-witness Emily just to provide some response there. So referring back to the ANAO audit in 23-24, that did outline that there was some outstanding issues around user access management, with particular reference to ISM control, one of the essential 8 controls relating to access to systems and networks. And that audit finding did identify that there was some gaps in Defence's ability to articulate how we remove users across all employment types in a timely manner. So that was probably the starting point with that one, Chair. Emily, I would seek any further commentary from you. Are you on mute, Emily?
To clarify the question, this was relating to the most recent statement of financial performance from Defence?
24-25.
Yeah, I would have to take that one on notice in terms of why we haven't submitted any category A or category C findings from that. I can make assumptions, but I'd prefer to make sure that we provide you a correct answer on that.
Sorry, Chair.
Please.
I might just add that for 24-25, so the A finding that we raised was first raised in 22-23. Defence sought to resolve that in 23-24. We were unable during that period to verify that the actions that had been taken by Defence were satisfactory for the resolution of that finding, mainly around data issues. During 24-25, Defence undertook a bunch of actions, including standing up a project team that successfully resolved the matter, including implementing controls as well as data reconciliation that was able to demonstrate to us the effectiveness of those controls. And as such, at the end of the 25 year, there were no A or B findings that the ANAO raised. So Defence has successfully resolved the matter during 24-25.
Right. So ANAO made concerns in 22-23. Defence resolved them, and then you didn't have any further findings in 24-25.
That's correct. No significant or moderate findings. Yep.
Got it. And so, how did you get to that point? What were the things that Defence did that meant that you fixed it?
I might hand over to Defence to talk about that.
Please.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Chair. John O'Dulgen, I led the Project Trident team, which has been called out in ANO's submission for 2024-25 closure report. Chair, I'm happy to step through, the broad principles of design of the project, what it got after and how it achieved the outcome. In briefing through the structure of the project team, the principles of engagement were very clear up front, ensuring that we had strong sponsorship. So at the tail end of 24, the senior responsible officer responsible for closing out the Cat A finding moved across to the CIO. So we became more of a technically driven solution with partnership from the business. So having that strong sponsorship in place, having clear plans and communications across all stakeholders, including the SRO, key stakeholders, and including both internal and external audit components. So working very closely with ANAO, being transparent, so maintaining transparency across project, regular feedback loops and testing the hypothesis of design, and ensuring that as the project progressed through its iterative development of solution, the solution that it was actually cross-checking and taking on that feedback. And finally, embedding both business and technical components in the delivery of the project. In terms of what Project Trident had undertaken, there was 3 phases. The first phase was driven around discovery, clear understanding of the data sources, the 3 data sources in question, and of course driving towards defining what initial operating capability looked like. That was driven, so Trident was established in the first week of November 2024, and by the 11th of January 2025, we had achieved the initial phase of IOC, which was the manual processes required to be able to verify and initiate the removal of user access from our systems manually. Phase 2 moved into a semi-automated process. There was a range of business rules that were developed, and each of these steps were actually moving towards Phase 3, which is actually a fully automated solution. So in terms of timeframes, Phase 1 achieved its outcome by the 11th of January 25. Phase 2 achieved its outcomes of semi-automation by the 19th of February. And in the intervening period, ANAO was consulted, as was the internal audit team, to ensure that what was being built was fit for purpose and use. Phase 3 had a longer tail, Chair. It did take some months to be able to build a fully automated solution, but that was achieved on the 14th of October. And between Phase 2 and phase 3 was when ANAO did deem a level of confidence that what Trident was delivering was fit for purpose. Happy to take any questions.
What was the sort of sorry, I'm gonna have to intercept my daughter behind me. Sorry about that. I might need to go and make a bottle for a second as well. What was the so you started off basically going users need to be removed. Let's do this manually when they leave the organisation, and then you sort of migrated across to an automated version of that. Can you explain how that works and why it works better to do it in an automated way?
Absolutely. Thank you, Chair. So the steps taken was to look at the source data set. So we have 2 distinct data sets, one that focuses on our permanent employment workforce, both APS and ADF, and it's our HR system in the form of PM keys. And the second element was to look at our contractor workforce, which is managed in a separate database and is managed around contract timeframes, so commencement and conclusion of contract. Those 2 elements become the source of truth in terms of delineation between ongoing employment and cessation, and that became the basis of how we validated access against network, and that network authentication was driven through our Active Directory dataset.
And how many people are we talking sort of? Give me a scale of how many people we're talking about sort of coming off the system.
Absolutely, thank you, Chair. So as Trident went through its phased delivery in the earlier weeks, what we were identifying, and I do want to just qualify this statement, that the business rules around Trident were being built iteratively. So the first few weeks we did actually see numbers in the vicinity of hundreds of exceptions. And I want to again qualify that it does not mean that they were not removed in a timely manner. It was actually exceptions to the business rules which we were building. So as those business rules matured, we were able to articulate that there was actual specific employment types and conditions that needed to be accounted for. And therefore the business rule library then formed quite a solid foundation to formulate automation.
So just to unpack that, basically there were hundreds of people who had users who had sort of logins or ability to access the network, and as Project Trident was being developed, it was identifying different people who either had access to different parts that were not appropriate or who should have been removed altogether. Is that the kind of?
If I can correct the record, please, Chair. It wasn't that the individuals had access beyond what was required. It was the rules, the exceptions, which Trident had established, and we were capturing those exceptions. The basis of Trident delivering an enduring solution was to ensure that we had a high confidence, dare I call it, framework that established that as we identified exceptions, we had treatment plans in place for those, and those treatment plans have been documented as part of the enduring solution.
Any users that were was it more a case of just people had left the organisation or people had sort of moved or whatever and had access, had their account but weren't accessing it, or were there actually also accounts that you identified that were being accessed that they shouldn't have been accessing?
Thank you, Chair. I think the delineation here is between is the movement type. So as an individual may move between different employment types within the organisation. So whether they're an APS one day, move into an ADF role, or potentially become a contractor, it was about understanding that delineation and how that would be mapped into our framework.
So it was more people had a different role, therefore should have different access, and was still having access to the old role and they were in the new role more than anything.
that would be a fair characterisation, yes.
And in that, were there any incidents where Trident identified that people were accessing information that they shouldn't have?
The basis of Trident is to remove access first and ask questions later. So where we have identified exceptions, they do go through a process of being assessed by our security organisation. So they look at any kind of access, what's been accessed. There is some examples where that's occurred, but as I've mentioned, access is removed first and questions asked later.
And what questions were asked?
Why they've accessed. In most cases, Chair, some of the reasoning is that they have legitimately moved from one employment type to the next. So there is some prime examples that have been brought forward and support the position that the employee has put forward.
Right, so there were no major security concerns as part of this process?
Not that Trident has picked up, and that has been assessed through our SOC arrangement, so our Security Operations Centre as well. That is working very closely with Trident's processes, so any exceptions that are identified are treated as a security incident, and those are assessed on a case-by-case basis.
I mean, part of these hearings is also about identifying good examples for departments to follow, and it sounds like there's been a very direct effort to address the issues that were raised by the Auditor General. I guess, are there any comments by the Auditor General on that, around how this project was able to remedy, or things that other departments can take from this process that clearly still gaps in other parts of the public service?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think the defence experience is really significant for other entities across the public sector. What we've seen in our financial statements audits for a number of years now is that the single greatest category of audit findings relates to IT controls, weaknesses in IT controls, and the single largest category of weaknesses in IT controls relates to IT security and specifically user access controls. So there's a lot of relevance from defensive experience to other entities. The public sector is sitting on a considerable amount of risk related to IT systems, and it is concerning that this has been the case for many years now. In our financial statements audits, we consistently find these weaknesses in IT controls. I think what's one of the things that's most notable about Defence's experience, as we heard, is that the risk was treated not just as a technical issue, but was treated as a business risk. And as we heard, there was senior leadership sponsorship for change to happen. And that has helped to create the change that we have heard described, and led to the downgrading of the finding. I think the other factor was the quality data that was generated to inform the changes that needed to be made to controls. What we often see in efforts to address findings is that the matter is treated more as a technical issue, and we don't see that sort of whole of agency leadership that we saw in Defence. So I think there are a number of lessons to learn from the experience. But I'll just check whether Ms. Craswell has anything to add to that.
Thank you. Yeah, so in this case, I think the thing, when Defence outlined the work that they've done, and Mr. Arjeljan outlined that they'd set up a project, Trident, sometimes other organisations may consider the size of Defence and think, but we can't do that. The quantum of Defence is such that this was actually also a very large issue at Defence that was complex. The thing that helped Defence succeed, as the Auditor General said, was treating it not just as an IT issue, but as Mr. Arjeljan outlined, it was a project that brought together the data, the IT, the technical and the business people, and they put in assurance processes along the way and ensured that the controls that they were putting in place were fit for purpose and actually addressed the issue. Other entities can do that for the same scale and risk that they have as an entity, in that if they look at working with business, HR, IT together, they can actually address the risks in their IT environment and have a good source of data to understand what their environment looks like.
Well, then I think this is a nice segue to the Department of Finance, who obviously you play a role in ensuring that the financial reporting is happening across departments. But have you identified in your liaison with other departments any weaknesses or risks for agencies?
Not in addition to those identified by the Auditor General and her team. I think we would support the comments made by the ANAO in regards to the importance of the IT general controls, particularly to financial reporting. And we continue to provide as much support as we possibly can to chief financial officers and their teams around guidance material, training, seminars, panel discussions, including with the Auditor General's team to try and elevate the prominence of these particular risks within entities.
So how does it work with finance? How do you sort of so you do panels, training, that kind of stuff. But do you look at the reports that other departments produce, or do you look at the other departments? Do you assess where the other departments are up to in their reporting or identifying risks?
We do look at their reports and not just those from the Auditor General, but from other review bodies as well. We don't make assessments of departments and their action or remediation against those particular reports. That's not the role of the Department of Finance and not within our remit. But what we do, where it's a persistent or pervasive problem that's been identified, we will look to build that into our policies and guidance back out to entities. We work very closely with the Auditor General on specific issues in relation to that and financial reporting particularly, but across other areas as well.
So basically, thank you for that. So basically, Finance's job is to sort of read the reports, see if there's any trends that span across departments, and then build that into your engagement with all agencies as part of your work on this, in order to sort of uplift the general capability across things in a broad sense. Is that kind of the approach?
I think that's correct. Where particular departments and I'm going to say also particularly smaller entities have more significant issues, we will work more closely with them on a case-by-case basis. We have I think we have very good positive relationships with chief financial officers and their staff. It is the smaller entities that struggle a little bit more with remediating some of these issues that are identified. They have very small teams. In some entities, the finance team might be one person and the IT team might be one person. And so their capacity and capability is somewhat more limited than in the larger portfolio departments. So we will work with them and work with their portfolio department to assist as well.
Assist with what?
Supporting them to remediate the issues that have been identified, be compliant with our policies and guidance where appropriate.
And so what sort of issues are they?
Ones identified by the Auditor General in her reports. From time to time, there may be particular accounting policy issues that might arise that we might work with them on understanding and reaching a position on, for example.
So basically, the Auditor General makes findings, they identify issues with different agencies, and then you, off the back, Finance will then work with those agencies to try and assist them in meeting the Auditor General's requirements, basically, or advice.
At times, we do operate more, as you mentioned before, at a whole of government level. We don't work with all agencies that have issues that have been reported by the Auditor General.
Just the small ones on a case-by-case basis.
That's correct.
And do you ever work with agencies, separate to an Auditor General finding?
At times, yes. That would be the case where there may be, for example, themes that we may have identified in our work with agencies. We are very frequently sought out for our advice across the APS. And if we start to get repeated requests for advice in particular areas, for example, then we would identify that that might be something where additional training and guidance might be helpful.
But nothing initiated by the Department of Finance. You never initiated that sort of engagement.
That example that I just gave would be initiated by us. So there isn't an issue that's reported by the Auditor General or in any other reviews or recommendations that's been identified. That's through our work with agencies where we may have identified a capability gap. And so we may then look to update our guidance policy material, or it could just be as simple as running a training session that's available to all CFOs and their teams on that particular subject matter.
Mm-hmm. But it's not a sort of a direct engagement with the department to identify a problem or discuss a problem, or you identify a problem or they identify a problem. Then you give training and advice, and then you then a few months later work out if that's all been implemented. It's not that kind of arrangement.
On some cases, some examples it may be. So an agency may reach out to us directly and say, we've got this issue from the Auditor General, we're not sure how to resolve it, are you able to offer us some help? And if we're able to, we would.
And what have been the main things that you've done training on or remediation on?
So we have a very broad range of training. I would say it's not generally in the area of specific IT controls. That's not within our remit, but it may be on how to prepare financial statements, particular aspects of disclosures in financial statements. We also do a lot of career management type conversations with CFOs and their teams as well, but a very broad variety of financial and accounting policy related training. I don't have the list in front of me today, but we could certainly provide that to you if that was of interest.
I mean, sort of all of that sounds completely reasonable, right? All of that sounds like the Department of Finance is trying to be helpful in especially with agencies, or especially when there's an Auditor General finding of some risk in, or some weakness in either IT controls or financial reporting that you then provide training on. But is it not all a bit sort of vague and distant, that process and that sort of general approach of things that you identify and then sort of included in training? And like, it doesn't seem like there's sort of much direct, okay, here's a problem, this agency's got a problem with financial reporting, we have a team within finance that assists this organisation. They then, through engaging with the Department of Finance, get it up to a level in which the Department of Finance is compliant, so that it's compliant with the regulations and requirements of that organisation, and then and that engagement is ongoing until the Department of Finance has confidence that those standards are being met. I mean, isn't it seems like it's sort of we're sort of dancing around the bush when it actually was just go and talk to people and fix things. Or is that not what's going on?
We do have portfolio leads in our agency advice units within the department, but we don't actively seek out departments or smaller entities and all of their audit findings and seek to work with them extremely closely to resolve their issues. Under the PGPA Act, accountable authorities are responsible for their system of internal control. It is a devolved framework, and so we do lean in where it's helpful to do so, but at the same time, that ultimate responsibility does sit with the accountable authority. In relation to financial reporting, chief financial officers for IT matters, chief information officers, they also all have roles to play. I'm not attempting to not take responsibility or accountability, but as I say, we will lean in where it is helpful to do so on those matters, but ultimately the accountable authorities are responsible for that control environment. They need to be assured about their risk assessments, the controls that are in place and the operation of those controls as well.
But isn't finance's role to ensure that reporting across the Commonwealth and that IT controls are effective? What is finance's role here? What do you have to do?
So we put the policies and guidance in place to support accountable authorities to meet those requirements.
So you set the policies, and you don't have any statutory role or any requirement to actually ensure that they're being upheld?
We don't have a compliance role at all.
But in the setting of those policies, you engage directly with agencies and with in order to understand what's going on in their organisation and the themes and issues that are identified, basically.
That's correct.
And then maybe more specifically, I mean, what are some of the things that you've identified? What are the big issues across the APS that Department of Finance have said, look, this now needs to be our new baseline of how we have our IT control across the APS, and this is the policy that everyone needs to comply with in order to give everyone confidence that agencies are actually doing the right thing.
So Department of Finance doesn't set the baseline for IT controls, IT security. We certainly do for financial reporting purposes. And there's a variety of matters that I could mention in relation to that, but for IT specifically, that is not the role of Department of Finance.
So no engagement with IT controls?
Not no engagement. As I mentioned before, we do look to understand the matters that have been identified by the Auditor General and her team in the performance of their work. If we think there is matters in relation to that we can be helpful to entities to provide extra information, extra guidance or general training about financial reporting on, then we would. We have done that a number of times, including with officers from the Australian National Audit Office with CFOs and CIOs, bringing them together. As both the Auditor General and Ms Craswell mentioned, we would agree that bringing together IT and business is very important. So we have also strongly advocated for that in the context of financial reporting.
Right. And what are the things that you've identified across financial reporting that could do with, what are the issues across the APS?
So accounting for estimates is one particular technical area that we have been very strongly supporting CFOs and their teams with. The appropriations framework, a little earlier in the hearing today, there was conversation around Section 83 and legislative compliance. Those are the matters that are perhaps front of our minds at the moment.
Makes perfect sense. Maybe if I can just go back to the ANAO, and we'll obviously go back to sort of other IT control assessments in the same way that finance is doing the the financial reporting. But is this something that you think is a sort of gap across the APS where there is, like, is anyone else playing that role to a level other than you guys around assessing whether agencies are
I think given
looking after their IT?
Apologies, Chair.
No, sorry. Go.
Yeah. Given the persistence of our findings on IT controls, I think it's fair to say that more needs to be done, both in accountable authorities, and I think there is a question about what more can be done centrally. The reality is the risks that are related to our IT findings are growing considerably. We're in an environment with heightened cybersecurity threats. Agencies are increasingly using emerging technologies and artificial intelligence and new technologies more broadly to deliver services, to run their operations. And so risks around IT controls are growing. And in our view, there's a need to accelerate efforts to strengthen IT controls. There are efforts that are underway, and we welcome those. We work closely with finance and some of their panel discussions and communications across the sector, as has been outlined. But there is, in our view, a need for further efforts. I think it speaks to the priority that's placed on IT controls across the sector. We still have findings, and we're not seeing them addressed at the rate that we think they should be. Ms. Craswell,
and maybe if Carol, if you're one of your team, start with this, and then I might go back to finance, given the sort of in and among the conversations around how agencies address this. But I mean, given there are, each entity has its own responsibility to ensure that it's compliant and safe and protecting the user's information or the public information or the information and the data that it holds. But clearly there are mixed responses depending on the effectiveness of that agency. Are the problems related to a lack of capacity or lack of awareness of each individual agency, or is it the fact that there isn't just a central good go-to authority that is there to be constantly assisting and monitoring and upholding the IT controls of different agencies? If the committee's making a recommendation around where the best place to start is to fix this, sounds like finance doing some good jobs around training, identifying issues, providing training, assisting with organisations and agencies, but it's not kind of, the rubber's not hitting the road, it sounds like, in accordance with your findings.
Yeah, I mean, there are all of government, whole of government policies, requirements in place around IT controls and ASD. I think a primary responsibility for the ISM, which is about IT controls. I think anytime we look at all of government policies and their application across the sector, there's always a question to the policy owner about how do you know whether that policy is working. And while the policy owner might not have compliance functions, there is a role as a policy owner to ensure that the policy is being put into effect well. And what we see in the IT control space is that more can be done to ensure that the policy is working as intended. There are always choices to be made about, as Ms Fox put it, where to lean in and where to put the responsibility on the accountable authority. But where you see persistent weaknesses over many years, then I think that is evidence that centrally more needs to be done to ensure that accountable authorities are implementing policies as intended. Any
advice from finance, given in their submission relating to IT, in your submission relating to IT controls, Finance says it will continue to provide support to CFOs to identify and manage the risks as they relate to financial reporting. In the recent past, this has included convening dedicated seminars and panel discussions, including with representatives from the ANAO on the importance of strong and effective IT controls and the impacts of financial reporting. I mean, in your discussions, in your seminars, in your panel discussions, and the support that you provide to CFOs, I mean, what comes out of that? What do organisations say? All right, here's our pathway forward. Here's how we're going to manage it. Is it about skilling up each individual agency and each CFO, or is it about actually, or is there more support needed that you think in order to fix things?
So the Auditor General mentioned that the remit for the ISM, so the Information Security Manual, sits within ASD, so within the Australian Signals Directorate. I can't comment specifically on their role as policy owners and where they may be doing work in this space. We have definitely in the past collaborated with them on some of the training that we have provided out to chief financial officers. I think it's important as well that chief financial officers aren't generally solely responsible for IT controls within their agency, and it does take that collaboration with the Chief Information Officer also. So there's a very important link there that I think perhaps needs to be made. It may also be worth a conversation with ASD.
Yeah, that's good advice. I guess so. And I appreciate the. I know I asked a lot of sort of annoying little specific process questions, but it's the reason behind it, Ms. Fox, was just to answer that exact question of, all right, so we've got all these persistent findings by the Auditor General that IT controls are not being managed. There's this really good example by the Department of Defence that basically identified that a whole lot of people were having access to parts of the organisation that they shouldn't have. They identify a team, they got straight down to it, identified the processes, identified the way in which it needed to be checked. They built automation around that, take action to protect information and data first, and then you can always walk that back and create new accounts if you need to. It just seems like a really specific and a really targeted way of dealing with a problem. Now, given, no doubt Project Trident probably cost a fortune to John seems very impressive, and his team probably, has a budget to navigate the big job that they had to do. But something like this, I mean, the pace of IT risks and incidents and issues can move so fast that having time to, through finance, through different agencies, through different things that sort of are very general and are very much around, response to an Auditor General's report or response. It just seems like our committee's focus needs to be on what can we recommend to ensure that if there are persistent findings by the Auditor General, what needs to happen so that the IT intervention or the IT controls can be improved quickly and in a targeted way, and each agency has either a clear place to go in order to get the help that they need in order to do things quickly and build structures so that they can protect their information or their data or minimise their risk. And it being less sort of, less part of this sort of general, well, you've got a responsibility, there are policies, finance is there to help support run training, but I'm not surprised that the Auditor General is sort of keeping on finding that there are still risks because it's which is not finance's fault. I mean, finance's job, as you said, Ms. Fox, is not to be in there and rolling the sleeves up on on identifying and helping identify. It's about sort of the support around financial statements and financial reporting as well. So it's a tough one, but it sounds like that's where the big gap is. Is that consistent with the Auditor General's sort of findings that there are still there's still a gap around the way in which agencies are able to remedy or identify or take action swiftly to minimise their IT controls?
Yeah, look, I don't think that there's a technical gap. In fact, we've just heard from Defence that it is entirely possible to address weaknesses in IT controls, and I think we also have NBN here as well, and they have successfully done the same thing. One of the key takeaways from those experiences is the need for entities to have strong sponsorship of leaders. And for leaders to treat these matters as a whole of business risk and bring different parts of the business together, IT and others, to help to resolve it. But it is entirely possible to do. We think that there just needs to be more of a focus on this.
Well, maybe in the last couple of minutes before we pause the hearings and come back with our session on AI, maybe the NBN, on that theme of leadership and on taking this seriously and putting the resources in that it requires, do you want to talk through how that happened across the NBN and was there buy-in across leadership of the organisation?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for the question. I think our learnings are really consistent with what the ANAO has said, and that is that once we realised that this wasn't an IT issue, it was all a business issue, we brought the right resources to bear in a multidisciplined project team that looked across the business. And I think the way that we considered it is it's really looking at it along the hierarchy of controls. What are the preventative controls that we can put in place? What are the detective controls that we can put in place? And what are the mitigating controls we can put in place? And if you run through that hierarchy of controls, we really found across the business we're able to address each one of those. So, for example, in the preventative controls, we worked with P&C, who are people in culture who owned the process, but also owned the training, the e-learning that educated our people on the importance of making sure people were removed from the system. We went into the enhancement of controls and, in fact, the detection in a Splunk report was developed, and my colleague can talk more about that sits across all of our systems to detect when we've got inconsistencies, particularly around access to our systems. And then on our mitigating controls, with P&C, our people and culture team, now run a report on a monthly basis by executive that tells us who has terminated people late in our system so that we can then address that and address the behaviours and make sure that those don't get blown out. So I completely concur with the comments that it really took a multidisciplined approach for us to find a pathway forward. While it was bogged down as an IT solution, because this was a behavioural issue, it was floundering. But once we turned that corner and saw it as multidisciplined, we found that solution.
What do you mean by behavioural issue?
Well, it takes somebody to go into the system and actually put the date, a termination date, into the system. So if people don't do that, and they don't appreciate why that's important, then that's where things tend to lag and things get done retrospectively. So that's why the e-learning at the beginning was so critically important for us to make sure that people appreciated the importance of that. And that's what I mean by it. When I talk about behavioural controls, I talk about them as soft controls. Hard controls are things that people cannot break. The soft controls are the things that rely on behaviours. So making sure that people's behaviour is consistent with what we require, I think, is very important.
Great. What was the timing of how long the NBN Co kind of identified the problem, threw resources at it, and made the necessary changes to sort of quickly identify some of the risks and fix them?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Initially, the problem was identified in FY23 as a C finding. was elevated in FY24 when the ANO detected that people had accessed the system that had been terminated, and that was elevated in importance. And when that happened, that was the turning point where we found that's when the multidiscipline team came together. But I defer to my colleague who was here at the time that can maybe speak to that.
Right. So you're right, that's when we put together the cross-functional team with finance, HR function, which we call people and culture, and obviously technology, and really did stare into that full suite of controls. After that, less than a year, we had it downgraded quite rapidly in the ANO's estimation to a C finding again, and then closed before the end of FY25.
So within a year and a half, you basically fixed it?
Yes.
And how many people, like what were the main problems that you fixed? Again, basically people had access to the, even after termination or after they ended working for the NBN and a few other risks. Anything else? What were the other things that you had to fix?
So at the heart of the problem, when our HR systems, and we just have one for all of our internal and external staff, was aware of the exit date of an employee, all of the, at that end date, all the systems automatically flowed through to remove access. But if an employee left early or a contractor left early and the manager had not told the systems that, then that didn't happen automatically. So the controls we strengthened were, first of all, as Simon's talked about, the training and also the reporting so that people get constant reminders about taking that action to tell the system when someone is leaving before their expected contract termination date. And with that, things flow through. But we also strengthened all of our detective controls. So yes, if the systems had not been told someone was leaving, it was possible for them to access the systems after their termination date. Should be clear, we never saw any instance of people accessing the financial systems or anything critical like that. We did see a few examples of people accessing the email they had left. So we enhanced those detective controls as well, so that we're able to quickly pick up. And also, anytime we do observe a late termination now, that's automatically referred to our security team for an investigation.
In the interest of time, I'm not going to go down a rabbit hole, but I thank you for that advice. And this session has been very useful, and I think it gives the committee some really clear parameters of which to focus our attention. So we are going to break for 10 minutes and just suspend the hearing. Thank you very much for giving evidence here today. If you can take questions on notice or been asked to provide additional information, can you please forward the responses to the Secretariat by Wednesday, 13 May. If the committee has further questions, they'll be sent to you in writing through the Secretariat. And we're going to take a short break until 22. we're currently doing a bottle over here, folks. So if I get distracted or interrupted, it's because I have a very bossy 4-month-old sitting on me right now. So you'll have to bear with me as I navigate that, as well as talking about the important issues of AI with all of you. All right, so I resume the committee's hearing into Commonwealth financial statements 23-24 and 24-25, and I called representatives from the ANAO, the APS Commission, the Australian Taxation Office, the Department of Finance, Department of Health, Disability and Ageing and Digital Transformation Agency. And for the Hansard record, would you please state your name and the capacity in which you appear before the committee? And Jenny, if you want to signal to go sort of around the room, starting with your right, that might be equal.
Paul Hubbard from the Department of Finance, Assistant Secretary in AI Delivery and Enablement.
Manita Lal, First Assistant Secretary, AI Delivery and Enablement Finance.
Lucy Poole, Deputy CEO from the DTA.
Chris Fackner, Chief Executive of the Digital Transformation Agency.
Hello, Faye Liu from the Australian Public Service Commission, Craft and Learning Branch.
Lisa Craswell, Group Executive Director, Systems Assurance and Data Analytics at the ANAO.
Carolee McLeish, Auditor General.
Carla Jago, Acting Deputy Auditor General.
Sean Benfield, Senior Executive Director, Financial Statement Audit.
Now, I think we've got people online as well.
Mark Saway, Chief Information Officer at the ATO.
And Andrew Watson from the ATO, Chief Data Officer and AI Accountable Official.
David Hicks, CFO, Department of Health, Disability and Ageing.
Faith Lavaris, Chief Digital Information Officer at the Department of Health, Disability and Ageing.
And Lisa Tepper, I'm the First Assistant Secretary for Information Technology at the Department of Health, Disability and Ageing.
Thank you all. I think that's everyone. As this hearing is a formal proceeding of the Parliament, the giving of false misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as a contempt of the Parliament. The evidence given today will be recorded by Hansard and attracts parliamentary privilege. I remind all that as Chair, I will ensure proceedings are conducted in an orderly, respectful and courteous way, and witness a reminder that any claim that will be contrary to the public interest to answer a question must be made by a minister and accompanied by a statement setting out the basis for the claim. Do any of the departments have any opening statements?
No.
Can't see them.
No, Chair. Thank you.
No, Chair. All right. I think the starting off point is around, for the purposes of the committee and understanding of the committee's understanding. Maybe if each agency wants to just sort of outline the work being done right now to utilise AI in whichever form around advice, around processes, around decision making, how is it being utilised right now and how is it evolving, I guess? Let's start there.
Thank you, Chair. Chris Fackner from the DTA, just for clarification. What I might do is start with a general position around its linkage to financial statements. I think it would be fair to say that AI is becoming pervasive across all aspects of technology and pretty much in government. So if I might keep it a bit more narrow to ERPs, and I think that, to financial statements. Most of the way that the Commonwealth delivers financial statements is through end products delivered through our enterprise resource planning systems, or ERPs, and this covers areas such as SAP, Technology One, Orion, Workday. They fit into that general category of ERP. In general terms, AI...
Sorry, can you just say, what does ERP stand for?
Enterprise Resource Planners. Yep. And it's a generalised term for the people that do the financial HR systems as a large part across the Commonwealth. And they're a specifically broad category of use all across the economy. So Within the Commonwealth, the main ERP systems that we do use is SAP and Technology One, and for HR, there's another product called Orion that comes in. There are smaller ones that are utilised, but I think all of those products are extensively investing in how their products are actually incorporating artificial intelligence and AI agents within their environments to actually support better processing and more effective outcomes through the use of ERPs. And the end product of those is often financial statements. But I wanted to talk a little bit more about the history of ERPs in the Commonwealth. So for a very long period in the history of the Commonwealth, between 2019 and 2024, there was a moratorium on investing in new ERPs in the Commonwealth. And what that actually, that was on the basis that the government was considering implementing a single ERP model called GovERP. And it was meant to actually address many of the issues about the complexity of producing annual financial reports. That program, through a series of changes, through a series of disagreements about the way that the system would be implemented, never actually came to fruition. So it never implemented. So in 2024, the DTR undertook an assessment to see how we could actually see what we could recover from that, and the result of that particular work was a new government decision on a future direction for ERPs, which was to allow agencies to make their own choices and implement in a consistent way. Also out of that, there was a recommendation that the Digital Transformation Agency support the development of an enterprise resource planning panel to allow a standardised approach to go to the market to actually receive services in that area. And we've been progressively increasing our work in defining standardised ERP patterns and working with the vendor community to bring forward those solutions. And importantly, we're working very closely with their introduction of AI within their product spaces. But I did also want to just go over some of the brief issues associated with the IT system controls that the ANAO have brought forward. And I wanted to use a specific example that demonstrates the overarching complexity and why this is such an ongoing issue for many agencies. And I'm just going to use an example that comes from a real-world example of an agency that actually receives services from an internal government service provider. But I'll tell you the layers that are in there. So the first two layers are generally getting access to the systems through the agency's own local environment, and then the system control to allow access to the system. Then a second layer can actually be that the HR system is an independent system. The third layer can be that the finance and reporting system is an additional layer. Expense and travel management is often taken out, and in this case is taken out, as a fourth layer. Procurement goes out in a fifth layer. Financial statements consolidation, so the work that we do to aggregate all the financial statements into portfolio agencies, is done in a separate system at a sixth layer. Reporting is often done at a seventh layer, and in the case of where a service is provided by another entity to an entity, the eighth layer is the management assurance levels that are required to actually give the agency head the authority to certify the annual report and the financial statements within it. So you can see, and it's been clearly demonstrated by ANA on a lot of occasions, that there is a high probability that one of those layers is going to have breakdowns, and things like people retaining access or having authorities that they shouldn't have, because of the cascading impact of actually stepping out of all of those environments is actually quite likely. And within ERP systems, there is a capability that's heavily developed in most of them called governance, risk and compliance. And it's generally a module that actually says, have I got the right internal controls? Have I got the right authorities that have been set up for expenditure, for approvals? They work very effectively, but because of the way that most government agencies work both on system and off system for some components or across systems, it's very, very hard to actually ensure that across the entire ecosystem that those services work as they're intended to do. And I think that again shows up in the audits. This is not a problem that's resolved very simply. And what I would say is that generally ERPs, because of the moratorium and other things, is a underinvested digital class. So we need to figure out how we work over the next 3 to 6 years on what we need to do next. So again, one thing I will tell you is many of the systems that government uses to actually create its financial statements fall out of support in 2027. So a migration of those activities needs to be undertaken by our drop dead date of 2030. So there'll be a large amount of concurrent work going on ERP statements, which again, I think will actually create pressure on the controls that we need to do, because they could be doing upgrades at the same time as they're trying to operate their systems. So it's a very complex environment for all government agencies right now.
Please forgive me, Mr. Beckner. I wasn't smart on your thorough overview. I was giggling at the ridiculous contribution, but cute contribution of my daughter here, who's just had a bottle and has now also done a few other things in here. And thankfully, you're on a Zoom here and you can't get the full appreciation of what's happening right now. So let's go. Thank you for that. That makes all perfect sense and that's very useful. So let's go into some of the specific examples of how it's being integrated, and then also how governance is potentially a sort of a missing step. And I might go to let's go back to the Department of Health and Mrs. Flavaris. How do I pronounce that?
Flavaris, thank you.
Flavaris, sorry, my apologies. How are you integrating AI to sort of streamline processes around either public interaction with programs or users' interaction with programs? How's AI being included in that process?
Thank you for the opportunity to give you a bit of a background on what we're doing. So the department recognises artificial intelligence and other emerging technologies are changing the way we interact, including with our fellow government agencies as well as with the Australian public. So the department has worked with colleagues across the DTA, Digital Transformation Agency, the Department of Industry and Science and Resources, on how we set up policies and frameworks and roadmaps for AI usage in our work and also in the broader health, disability and ageing sectors. So we're aligning our approach with the whole of government policy direction, including DTA's policy for responsible use of AI in government and the APS AI plan. So in practical terms, though, what this means is we've established a dedicated AI governance subcommittee that reports up into our digital committee. We are implementing an AI assurance framework and we require everyone in the department to mandatorily document their use cases that they're leveraging AI for, so that we can perform impact assessments to ensure risks are identified early and managed through the life cycle. This is a deliberately conservative approach to minimise risk. We are conscious of the risks, but we are also very conscious of the opportunities AI pose as well. So there is the potential for great benefits, but this cannot come at the expense of the trust in the Australian public. So very specifically, what we use is, at this point in time, the Microsoft 365 Copilot for generative AI purposes, which means people within the staff within the department that have a licensed version have access to that. We do have other tools that are being considered but are not implemented or used in production. So just so that Vertex AI is approved for use in our enterprise data and analytics platform or analytics. However, it is currently only being tested. So you can see we're taking a very cautious approach. And we have 6 approved use cases within the department, which are official information only for the use of the Microsoft 365 Copilot. And that's to give guidance to our staff on, what use cases they can freely use the Copilot for. These include documentation, summarisation and analysis, content creation and editing, meeting and task management, data insights and visualisation, information extraction and background research, and image generation. And all of these use cases are there to assist our staff to do their day-to-day work, and as such, content is the responsibility of the staff member to validate. So we talk about having the human in the loop. All other, that would probably be the extent of how we're using it at the moment. Hopefully that answers your question.
What was the, what's the sort of application more specifically around aged care, as overseen by health? How's AI being utilised in aged care settings?
So aside from those 6 approved use cases that I've just outlined, we would not be using AI in any other facet in the aged care space.
Wasn't there public reporting about it being used?
Not that I'm aware of. Well, I can tell you that we don't use it in any other fashion. So there is a distinction between AI, which is an automated, so agentic agent, right, versus we might have some business rules, policy rules that we have automated, but that's not AI.
So what are those business rules and policy rules that you've automated?
I can take it on notice for you, but I think particularly in the AI space, there was some discussion around the singular assessment tool, but that is just policy that has been automated. An algorithm was calculated outside of the system, so there's a few converging topic areas there. The policy area have developed their algorithm on what a single assessment looks like, and then we have taken those rules and digitised them into a single assessment tool.
Where is that? Where has that been done?
You mean the specific technology? Yeah, I'll take that one on notice and come back to you guys if that's okay. We have a number of different technologies in the ecosystem. I just wouldn't want to misquote you.
You don't have any rough idea of where it's being utilised?
We've got 3 or 4 different technologies in the ecosystem, but at the course grained. So it would be a combination of Microsoft, Oracle, Salesforce. There's a few of them in there, and different components sit in different parts of the stack. So it essentially is using the My Aged Care Gateway, an assessor platform that we've created, and then there's the government provider management system. And so there's a number of technologies under those platforms that enable the transfer of data across the journey.
So in My Aged Care Gateway, what's automated as part of that? It's not. This is not meant to. The purpose of these questions is not meant to be particularly sort of secretive or anything like that. It's more just sort of what's being used and how we identifying the issues to help us sort of manage this.
Well, I guess in summary, I'd start by saying there is no AI at all in aged care. So that's probably
the automated algorithms around like what's being used. So will you take away a manual assessment and you automate it? Where's that happening?
That happens in the application from the elderly person coming in and putting their application in My Aged Care. That data is then provided to the assessors. They access that data through an assessor portal. That is where the single assessment is then performed. And once they get a result from there, the data is then moved on into and passed on to Services Australia for them to do their serviceability and eligibility and entitlement. Like I said, it pretty much traverses the whole ecosystem and all technologies.
Makes sense. Didn't misquote me. That was.
No, cool.
It seems like a pretty straightforward response. So I don't think it's yeah. I mean, I think for the purposes of this hearing and the purposes of the committee, we don't need to have sort of nervousness around. Sorry, we're getting attacked.
She wants to ask a question.
She's got lots of questions asked. Do you want to say hello? Do you?
Hello.
Break the cycle. But then, okay, so you've got this automated process, right? You've got older Australians who are accessing this gateway, and that's about, like, there's good reasons, because the automation can make sure people get access to funding quicker, right? That there's obviously a motivation that makes it easier, more expensive, more cheaper to run. She's been this loud, by the way. She's really enjoying this hearing. But what about the governance around that? How is the department ensuring that the decisions being made by the automated process are the right decisions, and that they are not leaving people with plans that are insufficient or with too much, or sort of overly generous? How is that being governed and assessed right now by the Department of Health? Which is really the point of this hearing.
Yeah, so we haven't taken away the manual assessment. That's still there. The assessors undertake the assessment and record their outcomes. The algorithm just applies what is in the legislation and provides that to the assessors.
Yeah, but how do you make sure that, so in the assessors, how do you make sure that the algorithm is getting it right? Like, do you track that? Do you audit the sort of what the algorithm is spitting out? I
will need to take that specific question on notice, and I'll bring it back to you. It's a policy question, not a technical one, in the sense that we've done a full software development life cycle. So we track from policy requirements into business requirements, then we'll create the software, it all gets tested, and nothing changes. It's not like AI, which will.
So I'm not asking for your opinion on whether or not it's working. I'm asking for how do you make sure it is being implemented accurately in accordance with the legislation, and how do you ensure that the assessments or that the information that is being put into the AI or put into the program or the software or the automation is being governed in accordance with what the services that need to be delivered. It's not a policy question around what's your opinion. It's how is it being implemented, how is it being governed.
The implementation is through the software development lifecycle. So,
so how are you assessing this?
We have traceability from requirements all the way through to system design, system implementation. We have test strategies and test plans that test all the different scenarios, and that all gets completed and tested and validated by our business before it goes into production. And that has all been done.
Yeah, and then once it's in production?
It doesn't change. So that's where it's different to AI, in the sense that the AI tool might evolve.
The inputs in the application of a program are, like, I understand whatever gets put in one end gets spit out the same in accordance with the program software. But how are you ensuring that whole interface with older Australians or senior Australians is working?
I'm not sure how to answer your question, in that from a technology perspective, we have built the platform and tested it against the rules that were provided, and so it is a consistent output. Your question regarding you know, how does that meet elderly requirements? That's not the system. It's the technical system.
Yeah, but the department is the governing body to ensure that the software used is actually meeting the needs of the people who it's serving.
Correct.
So you know, you're not the Department of Software, you're the Department of Healthcare and Ageing. So what's the, like, how is the department assessing whether that interface, that you know, that usage of the software that isn't changing, I grant that, you know, that it is what it is. How the automation, how are you assessing it? What's the governance around that automation that's ensuring that it is doing what it's designed to do? Not from a technical point of view, but from a user face and the way in which it is, you know, is there an assessment on you know, do people understand how to use the program? Do people understand how to, you know, what information, where to go, what information to use, like all of the what's the feedback being received to the department, all of that stuff. That's the
great.
Yeah.
So number of things. When we went live with the implementation of the new Aged Care Act, there was quite a lot of work that was done to uplift training procedures and, you know, just manage the full change into the sector. Two specific things that I can speak to is the Digital Transformation Tech Talks. That was a series of information webinars where we would engage every 6 weeks with the sector to let them know what's all of the changes were coming through. And then a sub-community of that was also what we called our sector partner community. They were volunteers in the sector who signed up to be a sector partner, who co-designed a lot of the implementation with us. And so we got lots of feedback along the way as we were implementing. And then now that we've gone live, those at least those two channels, plus more from our policy areas, we continue to connect with the sector and they provide us feedback on any problems or concerns that they might have in that sense. There was a lot of material around training and procedure changes. And so I feel there is ongoing channels for the sector to provide us information and we can respond to.
Before I hand over to Sally, I mean, I guess from the Auditor General's point of view, the sort of the management of the automation or the assessment of the automation or the policies around assessment of the automation, and you know, I think that answer around making sure that there was a lot of information going out before it went live and a lot of training and a lot of communication with the sector seems like a really reasonable step to take. But what about the sort of ongoing, you know, as this becomes more and more prevalent across government, the sort of building in quality assurance and building in, you know, the sort of governance around it. Does the Auditor General have any views or any observations around any of that, or the insufficiencies or gaps that the committee could potentially focus on?
Thank you, Chair.
So I can't comment on anything.
Sorry. I'm going to go to the Auditor.
Great, thank you. Excellent.
Thank you. And across our audit work, we are seeing entities increasingly adopt AI and also automation more broadly, as we have just heard. And there are a number of potential benefits of this for efficiency, productivity, quality of services, but it's also clear that there are a range of risks to be managed. And so the key message, the key observation that comes from our work in this area is the need for really strong governance, risk management, assurance over compliance that is commensurate with the risks of adopting emerging technologies and AI. There are risks both ways, so risks of adopting these technologies and also risks of not adopting those technologies, particularly when they are increasingly being used by stakeholders of entities, clients, providers, contractors. So it's really about making sure that governance is fit for purpose to manage risk. because there is such rapid development in this area of the technologies, of the adoption, what we're seeing is that sometimes the governance and assurance arrangements are not keeping up with the use of AI. There are many good practices in place. We've just heard a few. But I think the key question is the governance keeping pace to manage the risks effectively?
Mr. Burns, if I could actually just add a little bit more, I think that might talk a little bit more about the automated decision making. By the end of this calendar year, the Attorney General's Department is putting out a framework on automated decisions making, and that's in response to the Robodebt Royal Commission inquiry. So there is a framework coming out, and there's been some interim guidance come out on those particular things, of which Faye's Aged Care Transformation Program has actually complied with those components. When you talk more generally about the use of artificial intelligence, the DTA has got the policy authority for responsible use of AI, and we've put out standards for transparency and standards for accountable officials that are going through. We've also recently published technical standards that actually support entities managing AI through their life cycle. So Faye mentioned a software development life cycle, or SDLC. AI has a different context in its operation, in that an AI can sometimes perform well in testing prior to go live, but then display behaviours that are not anticipated while it's in operation, because it can learn from its experiences and apply those changes to it. So we're currently doing quite a lot of work in conjunction with the AI plan to try and make sure that we've got all the controls in place. But as I think the Auditor General also called out, we also need to make sure that we can adopt these capabilities, because they do offer some very, very positive benefits as well. And you know, the Aged Care Transformation Program has been very, very strong in its positioning around ensuring that the quality of their deliverables are in place before they go live. And that was probably seen very much in the case of a deferment of the go live from July to November, because they needed to get more confidence that they were comfortable that everything was operating as it should. And one of the DTA's roles is to sit on governance bodies right across significant delivery programs to support them with the best mechanisms to ensure that their technology delivery works effectively, but also that it is a control point about where there needs to be breakpoints that put in place to make sure that unintended outcomes don't occur from the delivery of new software solutions.
I'll come back to you, but Sal, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks very much, Chair. I just wanted to approach it from a different angle. I know we've been talking a lot about risk and governance, and this is a question to all the agencies here. What have you got in place to make the most of what AI can bring? So what are the mechanisms or the personnel or resourcing or funding that you have set up to enable staff to, I guess, experiment with the use of AI in a safe and well-governed manner?
If I just jump in, I think some of our line agencies have got some really advanced capabilities, and I might throw to Mark and Andrew.
Just checking we've got ourselves off mute.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Andrew Watson from the ATO. So yes, we've done AI through machine learning for nearly a decade in the ATO. Have currently about 50 machine learning models that sit behind, yes, we're a regulator. They help us identify risk in the market. They also help us prompt and nudge taxpayers from a predictive behaviours. For example, a small business person that might be regularly late lodging their activity statement. We have some models that might send them a text message a few days before it's due to nudge them along. So we've had some governance around that. Since 2024, we have progressively, initially as part of the DTA trial, have had Microsoft Copilot available for a small number of staff. We've now expanded that out, a licensed version, to nearly 3,000, and we have Microsoft Copilot Chat to all roughly 20,000 staff. The reason we have gone with a Microsoft product is we have that behind what's called enterprise data protection. So it all operates within the ATO data tenancy. We don't have data leaving the ATO being used in training for any models there. So we have a degree of risk protection there. We have, similarly to what Faye described before, we've released in March a artificial intelligence senior and executive instruction. So that's a lawful direction from the Commissioner to staff, outlines responsible use aligned with the DTO policy. And we have a use case register which gives guidance around the sorts of things people can use responsibly, the AI for. We are seeing people use it in lots of ways, and now what we're trying to do, we've got the 1,000 flowers blooming. Now with our executive, we've agreed on 7 use cases to prioritise as an organisation that we believe will help us develop patterns to actually be able to use AI responsibly at a broader scale than beyond the personal productivity that it is currently being used with. So.
So can I just ask, so those 7 use cases that go beyond the personal productivity and agency-wide productivity, how is that, who is driving that? Who is driving the benefits and the innovation in those 7 use cases, and what are those 7 use cases?
Yep. So the decision was taken by our executive earlier this year on those 7. We're now setting up a program that sits underneath as the Chief Data Officer, myself, reporting through our Data Analytics Assurance Committee. We're working with our usual processes around how do we, what's the value framework of any new initiative in the ATO. AI is a little bit different because of it being novel. So it's a little bit of learning as we're going around how do we adapt that framework for the sort of AI use cases going forward. The other important part of it is we have each of those use cases has a senior officer from the business areas of the ATO owning those use cases. So we're wanting to have the benefits driven by the business, not being driven by the technology parts of the ATO. So we've set those up. They're different size and scale, the various use cases. For example, one of them is around how can we use Copilot in financial reconciliation activities through our ATO finance area. And that'll be leveraging some of the tools in the Copilot environment. And if you want at the broader end, how can we use AI to do some of the heavy lifting for information assembly, sorting, summarisation for some of our audit type activities, where as a result of a request for information from a taxpayer, might receive thousands of documents. How can AI help sort, turn a virtual shoebox into sort of a prioritised, organised list of documents and help to summarise and assist our people to then analyse that more efficiently?
So I might just add to summarise our approach. So with our 7 use cases that the organisation has decided to focus on, they're driven out of our central data area, called our Smarter Data Program under Mr Watson as a program management. But as mentioned, each of those use cases has a sponsor, an executive sponsor in the business area that the use case relates to, which is then really responsible for understanding how are we going to measure value, how are we going to understand if the activity in the use case actually delivers benefit or not, and how do we not just do that as a one-off, but industrialise that so that we're continually measuring and understanding the benefit as tools change, as technology changes, and that's managed through the central governance of the program that's looking after those 7 use cases.
And to the team at the ATO, and then I might have some more questions to the DTA, if I may. How are staff able to safely innovate using AI, given the sensitivities of the data? So you've got the 7 use cases, but what if they've struck a gold idea that they just want to see if it will work? Yep. What are the processes that are in place to enable a bit of experimentation?
So under our internal policy, so those 7 are the priorities that we're investing in as an organisation. Other use cases, we have published internally a list of approved uses, and if staff come up with a different way of underneath an existing use case, they have permission to proceed. If it's new and novel, they need to come to my area under a governance to look to register that use case. We need to then consider under the broader DTA policy, do a risk assessment. What's the level of risk attached to it? Does it use personal information? Do we need to consider personal information assessment? Do a data ethics assessment. So in order to and that is under our senior executive instruction, staff need to come forward, get that use case registered and approved before they experiment with that. But the first step is now checking with, does it fit under an existing use case, particularly given the spread of Microsoft Copilot, and particularly some of those uses as a personal productivity, personal assistant tool that isn't using, for example, sensitive or taxpayer information. A lot of those would be more broadly covered under some existing use case patterns.
Mr. Titu, Chris Fackner from the DTA. One thing I'd like to just start out with is that the Australian Public Service AI plan actually is built on 3 towers, and it's people, tools and trust. So we've got a focus from the APSC that's looking at how we're getting our people ready to be able to use the technology by training and guidance in that particular space. And we've got the Department of Finance that's leading on the development of tools such as the GovAI platform and the implementation of accelerators through the AID program, and I'll let Mr Hubbard talk more about that. But from a trust perspective, the DTA is really pushed to have policies in place before the rapid adoption of artificial intelligence. We've focused on transparency. We've focused on minimum capabilities. And we've worked with large sections of the digital industry to put in place clauses and protections. So, for instance, the ATO mentioned the Copilot implementation, Microsoft's generative AI tool that has been around for a couple of years in the Commonwealth now. The DTA ran a program on that started with training, started with a security assessment that made sure that Australian government information wasn't going to leak out into the models or into the public arena. So privacy and integrity of the information was guaranteed through both an assessment through the ASD-approved IRAP program, but also contractually through our volume sourcing arrangements. And the DTA has got significant guidance and implementations in contracts that protects our data against being used by models, that ensures that private or personal information has got limitations on how it's used, and we support agencies with an AI assessment capability that really looks, and it's a mandatory requirement for all high-risk use cases to go through this assessment criteria. And we're in the process of establishing an AI review committee where we have particularly sensitive AI cases that are going through, that we're going to get a body to have recommendations to the agency about what controls would support them in safely deploying that technology, or that could even go right up to a recommendation that they actually delay an implementation in those particular spaces. But I might pass to Mr Hubbard to talk more about GovAI and AID.
Thank you, Mr Fechner. So in response to the question, like, what are the areas where people can experiment and learn? The GovAI platform that the Department of Finance runs is the whole of government platform to provide that shared training, common tools, secure infrastructure. It's got a range of services that are part of it. I think maybe the most relevant here is an AI sandbox environment that people new to generative AI can use, that lets them see through structured tasks, structured learning, using different AI models, so what you get from the model, what comes out of it. And the advantage of that is it's not experimenting with AI on your own network and your own data. It's actually in a safe sandbox environment. The GovAI platform also provides, for some agencies, separate sandbox environments where they can also, again, experiment and build and test different AI approaches before they take them back to their agency to deploy potentially. And finally, the other thing I'll mention is a trial of something called GovAI Chat, which is just begun to allow everybody in the APS eventually to have the opportunity to access safe, secure models in a controlled environment as well.
Thanks, Mr. Hubbard. And maybe Ms. Liu can talk a little bit about the capability uplift that the APSC is leading.
Thanks so much, Mr. Fechner. So I work within an area in the APSC called the APS Academy, and we are supporting under the APS AI plan foundational capability for the whole of the APS. And really that's in two broad cohorts. One is sort of things we think that all staff need to know. And under that, Mr. Fechner referred to the responsible use policy, and one requirement under there, for example, is that every APS staff needs to do some mandatory foundational training, and so we provide that training on our network, and it's available to the whole of the APS. It was actually produced and created by the DTA, so it really has at its core understanding what the technology is, alongside what frameworks are in place to support and provide guidance and guardrails for staff, and then a sort of a series of ways of thinking about testing and understanding if AI is if it's appropriate to use it in this particular context. Like, is it the right tool for the job that you are seeking to achieve? I would just add... I'm
very sorry to cut across because we're just running out of time. While that's a helpful overview, there's a couple more questions. Ailey, can I hand over to you? And then if it's okay with folks, we'll go for about another 7 or 8 minutes. Ailey, over to you.
This is just a quick question. I'm Ailey, I'm the member for Dixon, north of Brisbane. Thank you all for coming here today to help us with this inquiry. I'm interested in how across the public service, this is probably for the Public Service Commission, how do we have a system for constantly tracking AI use across the public service, so the current use and expanding use? I'm just generally interested in how we track it because it seems to be every day I seem to be getting from even my staff or other people, I found out how to do this, and it seems to be on it's changing constantly, and I'm just interested in how that you are tracking across the public service its use.
Thanks so much for the question. I think there are kind of a couple of components to this that I'm hearing in the question. One of them is, how do we transfer knowledge between people in a really dynamic environment about how to use AI? And I would say there are some fantastic forums in which, some of which the Public Service Commissioner are involved in, some of which the DTA are involved in. So I would point you to something like the digital profession, which is where lots of people, and they may or may not be in digital roles, are really interested in AI. There are kind of, I think, more than 1,500 people in that forum who are on a regular basis teaching each other about how to use AI. The other sort of whole of government platform we're using in the Academy is a series of webinars which are open to all APS staff and really draw on some of the use cases, for example, that GovAI has established or determined that exist across the service. And these are really just practitioners who are teaching and sharing their experience of how to use AI in their kind of governance context, talking about how to navigate the systems that they have, both technology and kind of more broader governance and risk and assurance type systems. And so that's sort of one aspect of your question, but I will pass to Mr Fechner and the DTA because I think there's a more structural question around how do we understand what agencies are using when it comes to AI?
Thank you. So one clear area about is the transparency. So under our policy, all entities within the APS that fall under the policy, which is the vast majority of entities related to here, have a requirement to publish a transparency statement on an externally facing website that identifies the type and use of AI across their entities. And under the new version of the policy, they're required to keep an internal register. So you've heard the ATO talk about it, and you've heard Health, Disability and Aged Care talk about their internal registers. All entities are required to actually have that internal register as well. And the DTA also monitors the policy by collecting all of the details associated with the transparency statements of all entities. So I suppose the complexity around this is that the use and embedding of AI into standardised products that is happening everywhere makes that a very, very volatile situation. So another area that I would also call out that is a control that's been put in place, the Department of Industry, Science and Resources have the AI Safety Institute as part of their function. And I think 3 really significant recent announcements is memorandums of understanding with OpenAI and Anthropic and Microsoft that are talking about the safe and responsible use of AI and how government use cases can be safely and effectively evaluated. So it is a rapidly emerging environment, but there is a high degree of obligation across all Commonwealth entities to officially and transparently make their use of AI in particular areas. So when we talk about the areas, that could be service delivery, or it could be in forecasting, or it could be in policy development. And then they'll talk about the particular tools, whether it might be generative AI or facial recognition technologies that are used, or video transcribing, or those particular things that are broadly used. But the DTA, in a final piece, also has specific arrangements with most of the large software providers that require them to act in particular ways under terms of our contracts.
Ailey, you're on mute.
Sorry, Josh. Just one more question, if that's okay. In terms of incoming AI-generated material into departments, whether it be applications for things or people impersonating somebody else or people, even into our electorate offices, we get AI-generated stuff now. And quite often it is very hard to detect. And I'm really interested in how the departments are training staff, but also how are you identifying and making sure that, I know AI can help with productivity, but also if there's a huge influx of AI-generated materials incoming, how are you dealing with identifying that? And do you rule it out, or how do you deal with that generally?
So certainly we're not promoting people not being able to use generative AI to engage with government, and it is very pervasive right now. What we're actually doing with some of the fundamental trainings is to get public servants to understand and realise that content that's coming through is not always to be trusted that's being used to generative AI. We do have within our sort of contractual agreements for people that are engaging on a commercial basis with government that they disclose that they've used AI in the production of materials that are used and given to government. And we also require them to check their own sources before presenting them to government. You may have heard of a couple of cases where that process needed to be refined. But it is really saying that public servants should not just trust it. So the great risk associated with generative AI is the quality and the convincingness of how it's put together with it, where it could be completely and totally hallucinated. So it's actually about that fundamental awareness training that says this technology is pervasive, it's here. And there is the secondary or the stopgap position. So you often hear scenarios associated with people creating resumes for jobs within government that are AI produced. That's why we have multiple evaluation techniques that sort of, the first one might be a filtering one, but you would expect in an interview or an assessment process that they'd be discovered as being, faked through AI. And there is also a large number of standards. So the ISO standard 42001 is about how you manage a software lifecycle. We have new developing standards about trying to find fakes in images that have been generated that aren't there, and the government's already making some moves in that particular space as well, with some legislation especially about sexually explicit images. But we'll continue to see that the fact is the models are changing so quickly. So some of the earlier technologies that we used, AI technologies that we used to discover where AI content had been created, they're becoming less and less effective because the technologies are getting so much better. I personally have a little thing. Most models are North American. Whenever I see too many Zs in a document, I know that AI has been used in it. So, there are things that we can go through, but it is past the point of no return that people in all aspects of their life won't be using generative AI to draft documents, to submit grant applications. So it really becomes how do we educate and support our people to make good decisions afterwards.
I'm conscious of time, and thanks, Ailey. I'm conscious of time, and there's a lot of ground that we have not covered yet. And there is, especially around data security, AI infiltration of government data, what processes and governance around the protection of data by AI, from AI, the safety controls of AI. Have there been any incidents where AI has been adopted in a particular area of government and there's been incidents or issues of concern? Those sorts of things we haven't covered in, as well as I think there's still more to go into around governance of how the adoption of AI programs and processes beyond the webinar style or level of engagement, but actually around the oversight and the implementation of policy. I still feel like there's a lot more to cover. So what I might do is we're going to put some questions on, submit questions on notice. And sorry, Ailey, do you mind popping yourself on mute? Is that okay? I think there's feedback going on over there. Sorry, my friend. That's much better. Thank you. We'll put some questions on notice, but I think there's a high degree of probability we might recall this group at a later date to have a second hearing because I think there is a lot more to be done. So I would definitely encourage agencies, as much information as can be provided on notice, that will then potentially alleviate the need to gather everyone again. I know everyone's got a lot to do and very busy, but for the purposes of making sure this committee is able to provide recommendations on such a substantial matter, you know, an hour is a difficult task. So I'll just finish by saying that. So, but I do thank everyone for being here today. And if you've got questions on notice that you've been asked to provide additional information, can you please forward the responses to the Secretariat by Wednesday, 13 May 2026. And if any other committee members has further questions, they'll be sent to you in writing through the Secretariat. Thank you, Broadcasting. Thank you, Secretariat. Thanks, members, for being part of this today. Thank you to all of the agencies and the witnesses. And I will declare the hearing and the meeting closed. Thank you.